I reread Killing Stalking.
Killing Stalking.
Killing Stalking.
Killing Stalking.
Killing Stalking.
This Korean webcomic has gained popularity for its boys love elements and dark themes.
If you haven't read Killing Stalking,
It's a popular manhwa.
a very popular manhwa.
I wrote it down as a mission to complete. Reread Killing Stalking. And so I did. I sat down for a whole day in my bed rereading the whole entire thing over again. And when I tell you this was even more of a terrifying experience than the first time I encountered it, this is even worse.
Goodbye, buddy. How you doing? Who's reading this with me? You like it?
Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about one particular manhwa that was released in 2016. I made a horror manga slash manhwa iceberg tier list and I made a video about it. It was an hour long, and in specifically tier 3, I talk about one manhwa, very briefly though, and that manhwa is Killing Stalking. It was a long video anyway and I didn't want to go in depth, but today in this video I want to dive a little bit deeper. And not only are we going to talk about the story, we're going to talk about things outside of the story, the things that Killing Stalking has affected outside of lezhin.com. So ever since Killing Stalking was released, I've seen countless and hundreds of videos about it, and they all pretty much say the same exact thing. It is a toxic relationship and they describe the story itself. But today I kind of want to break the fourth wall a little bit. I want to talk about external factors. First, I'm going to explain the description of the story just a little bit better, just give you a little bit of a refresh if you did read it, or if you didn't read it, then I'm going to explain it. If you've already read the story and you're familiar with it, you can skip to the next section of this video. Killing Stalking follows a young man by the name of Yoonbum who begins to obsess over another guy named Sangwoo. Sangwoo is described to be a very popular figure amongst his peers. He has a lot of friends. He has a very high reputation. Nobody really sees anything wrong with Sangwoo. Everyone just basically likes him. He's that popular kid that everyone likes in college. So the way that Yoonbum and Sangwoo meet, they met in military training. So if you're not already aware, in Korea, when men enter a certain age, they have to enlist in military training for a couple years or so, or maybe even less. So Yoonbum enlists late into the military training program, so this makes him a little bit older. This is where Yoonbum and Sangwoo meet. So while they are in this military training program, Yoonbum gets harassed, and during one of these moments where Yoonbum is being harassed, Sangwoo sees this happening. He goes and he tells one of the bosses that, hey, there's someone being harassed right now. Yoonbum is saved, and he finds out that it was Sangwoo who saved him. And then this is where the real story starts, because this is when Yoonbum's obsession finally begins with Sangwoo. So once they're out of this military training thing and they come out and they're back in the real world, Sangwoo goes to college and Yoonbum begins to literally stalk him. This obsession drives Yoonbum to the point where he acquires Sangwoo's house passcode key number, and it takes him a couple months for him to achieve this. It doesn't happen overnight. When he finally gets all of the numbers to the passcode, he breaks into his house. So while Yoonbum is in his house, he enters through the first floor bedroom and sees a little door. This door goes down to a basement. So he's curious and he goes down the basement. He finds a hostage tied up without any clothes. So while Yoonbum is in Sangwoo's house, Sangwoo's out with a couple friends walking around. There happens to be a police patrolling around that area. The police in question is Sangbae and the chief. Sangbae is another important character that I'm going to touch on a little bit later. Chief recognizes Sangwoo walking down the street and he pulls up and he says, hey Sangwoo, you know how you been?
Hello. Hi.
The chief kind of sees Sangwoo as his son because he was involved in a case with Sangwoo's parents. That's how the chief is kind of familiar with Sangwoo, and they're like kind of buddy-buddy together. So the chief sees Sangwoo. The chief says, hey, your cousin is at your house. So let's rewind a little bit. While Yoonbum was breaking into Sangwoo's house, before he even entered the passcode, Sangbae and Chief were there, and they see him and they kind of question him like, hey, what are you doing here? And Yoonbum lies and says that, you know, I'm his cousin, I'm visiting him, I'm staying with him. So that's how they tell Sangwoo that, hey, your cousin, you know, is visiting and just want to let you know he's at your house. Sangwoo is like, what the fuck? Obviously, Sangwoo doesn't want to raise any suspicions for himself, to the point where the police kind of take it into their own hands and investigate the house just in case Sangwoo does say, hey, that's not my cousin. So he kind of keeps the lie going. He's kind of clever with that. He immediately goes back to the house and finds him there in the basement. So their first encounter is not the best. Obviously, Sangwoo keeps Yoonbum hostage. He refuses to let him go, but he also refuses to kill him because Bum admits that he likes Sangwoo. Even after seeing, the hostage on the floor, he just says, hey, I really liked you ever since military. You saved me. Sangwoo's like, dude, I don't know you. I'm gonna have to kill you. And Bum just uses this as an advantage to admit his love for Sangwoo. From this story onward, Sangwoo and Bum form this dependency on each other. Their relationship is very, very rocky, and it's not one that I would say that is the healthiest. So that's the brief explanation of the story. Now I want to go back a little bit and break the fourth wall. Stalking was uploaded to a website named Lezhin. This is when manga and manhwa were first starting to get really, really popular. And there weren't many diverse types of manhwas. They all kind of centered around romance and action. We didn't see any horror manhwas yet. It was a very, very niche category. But the one thing that was the most popular was BL Manhwa. BL Manhwa, even to this day, is very popular. It was growing and growing and growing. So because BL Manhwa was really popular, this resulted in Killing Stalking being uploaded to Lezhin, which is the most popular Korean manhwa website. It was labeled as BL. BL was really popular, like I said. So what this did for Killing Stalking was the story was advertised as BL on different platforms, and people had the wrong impression. The wrong audience seeing this story and giving it a go, thinking that it is some type of romance when it isn't. Meaning that the majority of the people reading it didn't know what to make of it. Instead of reading it through the lens of psychological horror, which is what it is, they read it through the lens of BL or romance. An even worse name to call it was yaoi, which is known to be a very controversial word. It's a very outdated term. Now you're probably wondering, why did Killing Stalking call itself a BL? Why was it romanticized? Why was it advertised as something it wasn't? It's simple. It wanted traction and it wanted it fast. Killing Stalking doubted itself before it was even published on a website. Because the horror manhwa genre wasn't that popular around this time, Killing Stalking had to put a really, really popular label on it, which was BL. Now, why was it a bad thing? The reason why this decision ruined Killing Stalking's reputation, it was all a lie. It wasn't what it was advertised as. It wasn't what it was commercialized as. It was targeting an entirely different group of people. They are used to reading romance. So when they read this type of thing, they are inclined to believe that it is nothing but a bad romance. The author herself even disclosed that it is not a BL. So to tag it as such would mean to shoot itself in its foot. Readers came into the story thinking that it was going to be about two people falling in love, but of course that's not what you're getting with Killing Stalking. What you're getting is a really fucked up story between two emotionally unhealthy people. Killing Stalking dug its own grave and jumped in it the moment it decided to sacrifice itself for the objective of gaining mass popularity as quickly as it can. Around this time, had it only relied on hope for it to gain popularity and traction, it would have risked the story being a flop. The sad fact is that it would have been just as popular. I genuinely don't doubt that Killing Stalking would have been just as popular if it didn't sacrifice itself. Another thing that I want to touch base on is that the characters themselves couldn't change. Killing Stalking had to stay the same throughout the entire story. The story wouldn't be the story it is today if the characters changed. The characters themselves, Sangwoo, Sangbae, Yoonbum, are very distinct. We know Yoonbum's personality. We know Sangwoo's personality. Sangwoo had to stay the serial killer. Yoonbum had to stay the obsessive stalker. Sangbae had to stay the obsessed cop. Had these characters changed at all, it would risk losing readers. If there was a change, the readers would no longer recognize them. It would no longer be Killing Stalking. And that is the reason why season 3 was a little bit different, but ultimately it circled around and came back to the same plot. Sangwoo being a crazy psychopath and Yoonbum being obsessed with him. There was no character development, but that's the whole point. It couldn't have a character development. It couldn't make Sangwoo better. Now let me ask you this question. Would you read Killing Stalking if Sangwoo was no longer a crazy serial killer? Would you read Killing Stalking if Yoonbum didn't like him anymore? I could also ask the same question to anime watchers. Would you watch Death Note if Light was normal and he didn't kill anybody anymore? Because I wouldn't. The whole reason why I did watch it is because of Light. The anti-hero concept is very hard to achieve successfully. And in fact, it is even harder than having the main character be good. If you're writing the main character to be bad, you also have to take note that the character has to be likable as well. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of people hated Sangwoo. He was the bad guy and people saw him as a terrible human being. That's the point of his character. He's supposed to be bad. He's supposed to be the villain of the story. There's no other villain that's gonna show up. It's just Sangwoo. In season 3, we see Sangwoo's personality towards Yoonbum drastically change. He starts being nice to Yoonbum. He starts to do things for Yoonbum. He's a whole different person, and people even made it a meme. The reason why people still recognize Sangwoo is because he was a very unpredictable character. Just think of wild animals. Think of a lion, jaguar. Sometimes they're friendly, sometimes you can pet them, but everybody knows that these are very unpredictable wild animals, and that's why you don't keep them around. Unless, of course, like you own a zoo or something, but that has nothing to do with it. That is kind of how Sangwoo was. He was nice for a moment to Yoonbum, but he was very unpredictable, and that is what kept readers on edge. We didn't really know what he was gonna do. Killing Stalking, it was a very good horror manhwa. A lot of people were under the impression that it was something that it wasn't, and I don't blame them because it did advertise as something that it wasn't. I don't blame people for complaining. Killing Stalking doubted itself. I don't think that it realized its potential until it garnered a whole fan base. People thought they were gonna see romance. People thought that they were gonna see Yoonbum and Sangwoo get better, but that's not the promise that it made. But it had to be that way. And another funny thing that I want to mention is that people would joke people ship Yoonbum with therapy, and the author actually shows this in the story that Yoonbum goes to therapy eventually. Ultimately, nothing works. He stays the same. Even till the very end, Sangwoo is the same. You see this visually. He doesn't change. The story doesn't rely on character development. It relies on character distinction. It wants you to remember these characters as who they were from the start all the way to the end. The thing about the story is that nobody was really innocent. A lot of people seem to victimize Yoonbum a lot. In my opinion, I don't think that he was all that innocent either. He was a victim to a lot of things, but he has also done bad things. He can often sometimes be selfish and manipulative just as much as Sangwoo. But the reason why we didn't really point this out as much is because right next to him was an even worse person. Yoonbum kind of came off as this poor damsel in distress, and that's not to say he wasn't a victim. I do pity him and I feel bad for him for all that he's gone through, but because of all of these experiences, he learns to be manipulative and knows how to lie. The other main character that we're looking at is 10 times worse than him, so that's why we don't see Yoonbum as that bad. Going back to Sungbei. Sungbei is the most cliche character. We see this detective who becomes obsessed with this case. Does that sound familiar? Obsessed. Sungbei is also a very selfish person. He thinks he's smarter than his colleagues, which admittedly he is smarter than his colleagues. He is just as clever as Sangwoo. Sungbei is one of the most important characters in the story. Most of the time he takes matters into his own hands because his reputation in his workplace is terrible. A lot of people think that he's stuck up, he thinks he's better than everyone, he thinks he's smarter than everyone. You know, his attitude towards his higher-ups is not really that good. When he brings up Sangwoo's case, nobody believes him, so he has to take matters into his own hands and investigates the case personally. He takes this case very personally. He is one of the dumbest yet smartest characters, and he's also one of my favorite characters. I think Sungbei has a lot of similarities to both of the characters. He's violent just like Sangwoo, and on the other hand, he's obsessive just like Yoonbum. It's kind of like if you took the two characters and put them into one, the story ends with all of them being involved in each other again. And the girls that get it, and the girls that don't. The only advice that I'd give anyone who's planning to read it or wants to read it but is too afraid is read it during the day. Try to enjoy it for what it's supposed to be and not for what it could have been. So thank you for watching my video. If you reached the end, make sure to subscribe. I would love to hear others' opinions. And yeah, thanks. Bye!